Welcome to AI for Everyone, the podcast that demystifies artificial intelligence and makes it useful for teachers, students, employees and employers, small business owners, and lifelong learners. I'm your host, Brett Hanson, a 25-year veteran teacher with over 2 years of experience exploring, implementing, and teaching AI to people of all ages. As a Google and ISTE educator, I'm here to help you navigate this quickly changing world with confidence, curiosity, and a focus on ethical, practical use. Each week, we'll start with a real-world story, introduce a freer, low-cost AI tool, teach a future-ready skill, and finish with either timely AI news, an interview, or a short history spotlight. Whether you're new to AI or ready to level up, you're in the right place. Let's get started. So, Episode 8 is going to focus on Custom GPTs and some of the other ideas or concepts and skills that go along with creating Custom GPTs. So OpenAI's ChatGPT offers, obviously, Custom GPTs for people. And Gemini's version is called GEMS. And they both work well. There's some differences between them. We'll talk about GEMS in a later episode. But this is the beginning of a real discussion about how you are going to be able to create your own personal AI agent. And we'll get to more on that later. But before we really dive in, I want to make sure that we remember the big picture view for anyone trying to become more comfortable with AI through the AI for Everyone system or mindset. We're not going to focus on the tools first or the big accomplishments first. We want to stay focused on that metaphor of AI being like water. And it is a powerful flowing force in our lives and will be for a long time. So we want to maintain an understanding of the different levels or modes. Modes might even be a better word, because that first level is, the mode or level of a beachcomber or someone who's in the water some, but not letting go of the ground. They're still, they still need some more security, but they are experiencing AI, and they might become, a daily user or someone who uses it a lot, just on a simple level or on a level that allows them to stay connected to dry land. The swimmer is the person who's going to strike out from dry land and actually immerse themselves in AI, in the medium of AI. But they're not going to look down below the surface. They're not digging deep into it and trying to see what's going on below, or they're just not realizing that. When they want to, they will become the snorkeler or free diver, however you want to call it. And these are the people who are looking below the surface, figuring out what's going on, understanding better how the tools integrate, and going deeper into the medium. And then, of course, the fourth level, the diver, this is a person who is exploring the deep, complex currents of AI. Now, this metaphor, hopefully, is helpful to understand the different levels and modes. But we have to pair with that metaphor a concept of what I call the essentials. Now, there might be more than three, but for now we're going to talk about the three essentials. And the first is experience. So in order to build skills, you have to have experiences. You have to have a project or a task. You have to experience AI in a certain circumstance. And we know from life that the more we experiment with things, the more proficient we become, as long as we keep the right mindset or perspective. Now, these experiences build our skills. And as we build more skills, we build more confidence. So the second essential is confidence. We must maintain a positive perspective on our growth, and our confidence will also grow. So as we develop our abilities, we will become more and more comfortable with AI. And then as our experiences build our skills, and together those help build our confidence, we will start to cultivate taste. Now, the phrase AI taste is an AI community phrase. It's good that we use it, but if you don't like it, you can use other terms like a feel or an aesthetic or an understanding. So the more we use AI at an appropriate level and we're growing our confidence, the more comfortable we will become, the more of a taste we will develop and cultivate, and then we'll start to be able to tell the difference between good outputs and bad outputs, and start to understand when something is flowing in a good direction and how things are working well together. So once again, remember, the labs are trying to get us to become users within their tools, within their system. So they want us to use Google and Google Gemini as our operating system for work and life and the day, or ChatGPT's OpenAI system, or Microsoft's Copilot, or Anthropic, or some of the others. So we want to make sure that we cultivate both our understanding of levels and where we're at and our comfort while we cultivate the essentials. And that is going to help us move forward faster. So the one thing that I strongly recommend, but of course is not essential, is that we try to do this with a beginner's mind. I think it is much more effective to be curious than to be anxious. So if we can try to learn it like a child learning something new, I recently taught summer school with, the youngest kids, 2nd, 3rd, 4th graders for chess, and then also for basic computers. And when they were excited about something, they grew faster and they just went forward and tried things. And then they'd get stuck and we'd work it out and try to improve their skills and then tackle it again. That beginner's mind is the way we're going to be able to not let perfect be the enemy of good. AI skills are not as hard as they seem before you get more comfortable. It's so new and complex in the big picture. But for the skills and for our development, you'll see right away, oh, that's not as hard as I thought it was going to be. And you'll find yourself saying that often. So we want here at Hanson Education Services to make the complex topics seem more simple and accessible. And a lot of that has to do with mindset. And so then you can focus on practical applications with free or low-cost tools that will allow you to grow and achieve your goals and be more marketable and get better jobs and things like that. Now, as we move forward, we want to remember that we always want to check our sources and we want to maintain an understanding of the process and we want to be mindful of what's going on in the news. And then finally, a reminder that I will repeatedly share is that we should never trust AI. We should never get sucked into the seductive power of the things it can do. But we also want to keep learning. And this leads us to the story for this episode, which is about me. Because just yesterday, I got sucked in a little bit more than I would like in the video production. So recently I've been creating some videos on VO3, which is an amazing tool. It creates really short videos and they're quite amazing. So I made 4 that I quickly just patched together in Adobe Premiere Pro. And I've shared it on X and LinkedIn, on my YouTube account, and then also on Hanson Education Services. You can see it on the AI for Everyone page. And I was really excited about it. And so then I started to explore Google's newer program Flow, which is, even in my opinion, it's better than VO3. It takes a little bit more effort, but you can create these amazing scenes with just text to video commands. And I started adding more to my scenes and trying to develop it. And I wanted it to create a video of a graphic novel type image. I wanted it to be of me and then a student or a young person who could be either a high school or college student feeling frustrated. And the Google Flow kept sending me back to real people, images of they're not real people, but AI simulated real people. And first it was kind of astounding how much their versions of me looked like me. But I didn't want that. I did not want to create something that looked impressive, but could have been deceiving. But after a while, I started to get frustrated, and I thought at one point, oh, forget it, I'll just use this because I can't figure it out. And that, to me, would have been an example of me slipping into the comfortable path and just using AI. I love AI, and I think it's really cool, but I am nervous about the fabrications of reality and misleading people. And there's a lot of it. There's no doubt about it. And so at the same time, I was thinking about how cool it would be to show my students flow. And then I realized the possibility of just slipping over into that unethical zone. So I don't know what I'm going to do. Right now, I have no intention of teaching my students about flow or trying to integrate it into any schools, but I will certainly try to become more adept at it myself and share it with businesses and adults who are trying to get better with AI. But I need to be careful how I move forward. It's really easy to slip over into potentially unethical activities or products. And I think if you're trying to trick people into believing that this is a real person or something, that's problematic. So that's one of the things I did, like with the VO3 videos, is I labeled them as AI videos. And it's clear that this, in the first video, it's not a real person, or it's AI because a dolphin stands up next to the young woman on the beach before they go into the swimming mode, and you can see it online, but I don't want there to be any misunderstanding. So I need to be careful about that. It's really quite easy to slip over into unethical areas. And I heard in the news earlier today that one startup is basically trying to get attention by using the sort of tagline or gimmick of cheat on everything. It's becoming a bigger and bigger issue. I found it repulsive personally, but I can imagine that some other people would think that any use of AI is in a sense cheating or misleading or problematic. So we're all going to find our realm or our zone. Now, this brings us to our tool of the week. The ChatGPT, Custom GPTs are these modes of creating a tailored version of a ChatGPT specifically for a purpose. Instead of a general purpose AI where the AI has to make an enormous amount of decisions, you can streamline the process. Now, just so I don't forget, I want to also point out that custom GPTs are better for the environment as well because they don't demand as much compute because you are limiting the content that the GPT will draw from, and that'll become clear in just a minute. So it uses up less water, less electricity, and it gives you a lot more control. So imagine, say you're a teacher, and you constantly need to generate project titles or scaffold writing prompts or something like that for your students. So instead of typing out lengthy instructions every time, you can ask your, say, teacher assistant GPT to specifically answer certain types of questions and focus only on certain curriculum or state standards or a pedagogical approach. So I have a couple that I've created, and I'm going to make more over the next few weeks. One of mine is grammarology. So I want my students in the 9th grade who really ought to know their grammar already, but if they have questions about grammar the way I teach it, I want them to get answers that come from the grammarology system. So they're going to rhyme and they're going to be connected with the acronyms the way I've created it. So that way they'll get an answer that aligns with what we've taught in class as opposed to a perfectly correct answer, but one that's different from what we've done in class. So another example would be, let's say you're a small business owner and you need help drafting marketing copy that has and maintains a specific brand voice. And you might call your custom chat GPT just brand voice GPT or something like that. If you're going to use it just for yourself, you don't really need to worry about a catchy name. And then you will give the GPT, the custom GPT, instructions and examples and details that make it easier and more straightforward for you to get a first draft of market copy that is specifically focused on the voice and ideas that you're trying to communicate. So how does a custom GPT work and become so powerful? Well, basically there are 3 components to a custom GPT. The first is the instructions. And when you create your custom GPT, you will see 2 spaces or options where you can either create or configure. And you want to get over to the configure side as much as possible. You can use the create. It is an easier, simpler path, and you might test one over there. But in the configure, you get to insert the specific instructions. So these are the rules and the persona and the tone and the goals that you're going to define for your GPT. This is where you're going to tell it exactly how to behave and what its purpose is. So, for example, if you're, let's say, a history buff and you want to share information with other history buffs and get ready for a history competition, a Q&A or something, you could create a historical fact checker GPT. And then you could either upload it with a bunch of data, say about World War II, or you can upload it with that data and also tell it that it can use the internet and search for data after it has checked the information that you've uploaded. So you can tell it not to go to the internet. You can tell it to use DALL-E and create images. You can use lots of the tools, and you'll see them in the instructions section. Now, the second part or component is called the expanded knowledge section, and this is where you upload those files I was just talking about. So if you don't want to take a risk on ChatGPT going someplace that you don't want it to, or you want to limit it to certain information, you would upload that information as a PDF, or there's a variety of methods that you can upload the information. So, and then now you're giving it a unique knowledge base beyond just its general training, and it does not have to use additional compute or go to the internet in order to answer these questions. So it becomes more efficient and therefore better for the environment. So you could upload, say, like a large manual for your small business's internal policies. One of the things that I thought about is, in schools we always have new employees, and we could, if the school decides to, create a custom GPT with the school handbook, the student's guidebook, parents, and any other documents that would need to be used in order to answer, first-year teacher questions. So there are lots of things you can do with it. Now, in the instructions and the expanded knowledge section, one thing that I've realized after making, about 10, 15 custom GPTs is that it seems to do a lot better if you put the information in chunks. And I actually did this kind of instinctively when I first started, because I've been trying to persuade my students for decades that we process knowledge in chunks that we can connect to other things. And so if you break it up into bullets or numbered items in the instructions and the expanded knowledge, you're much more likely to get good results or good outputs, because ChatGPT, and I think AI in general, is better at processing and connecting chunks of things. It doesn't have to work so hard and find additional information in between. I'm not 100% sure that's the reason why it works better, but I know it works better. So you want to put in bullets and chunks and information that way. The third component is the actions component. And this is where it starts to get interesting and potentially confusing. And this is where you might decide, okay, for now, that's not for me. I'm going to just save this for later. This is, I think, an area where you might jump up a level. I mean, I personally think you can make a simple custom GPT, even if you're sort of in that first level Beachcomber mode, and you might just use the create, not the configure mode when you first open it up. But the actions place is where you get to start putting in things like external APIs and schemas. And so I find this part challenging still. I have to work hard and get a lot of help for it to be successful. But this is where you, for example, might put in the external API to your Google Calendar. If you were creating a custom GPT that you wanted to be able to check your calendar for whatever purpose. So, for example, like if you're making a meeting schedule or GPT or something, you could set it up so that it will go through this external API and it would, connect to your Google Calendar. And an API stands for Application Programming Interface, but you don't really need to remember that. You just need to know that it's connecting to something else, and you have to give it the instructions. And ChatGPT will actually walk you through the process, but for me, especially the first couple of times, it was still challenging. You don't have to do that. And then in addition to APIs, external APIs, and the schema that you can put in, which I find complicated, you can also put in a disclaimer, which I strongly recommend. And ChatGPT will help you make one that you can simply put in the cloud anywhere and put the link in. So that means, you would put things in there like this custom GPT is not a replacement for a live teacher or legal advice or something like that, whatever disclaimer you wanted to put in there, and it'll help you make them. So ChatGPT or OpenAI has a custom GPT store where you can upload these and share them if you want. I don't share mine. I have no intention or desire to try to make any money. I will share it with people individually because you can share it with people with just a hyperlink. So I will put them on my webpage, and I will be building out a library of custom GPTs for different purposes and reasons. I'll make one for helping administrators integrate AI into schools based on federal regulations and things like that. And they could get those answers through a regular chat in ChatGPT, but they might head in the wrong direction. So this will keep it focused and streamlined and faster. So there are all kinds of possibilities for this. Gemini has their own version. They're called Gems, and I find them wonderful. They're a little different. We'll talk about them later when we dive into creating custom gems. And so all you should do now is just give it a try, and that will be sort of the launching off point or the practice thing that you could do for this week is to go to ChatGPT and click on Explore GPTs on the left. Now, I'm pretty sure you still have to have a paid account to make custom GPTs, and it's about $20 a month. So perhaps it's not worth it to you now. I know you still need, or I know you have to have a paid account for the gems as well. So this might be something that you'll wait until you decide which platform you want to use. Now, the skill that's really important to go with this is that concept of improving your prompting. So prompting strategies with the SWIMMER acronym that we talked about in episode 2. And SWIMMER is a guide, remember. So there are going to be some adjustments as we move forward. And this is an acronym to help us cultivate our prompt engineering. And this is one of those areas where we will definitely start to cultivate a taste for this engineering process. This is something that you really can't just use a handout. SWIMMER is supposed to help you, but what you need to do is to practice. And I think about, comparing it to athletes who, you can shoot as many three-pointers as you want, but if you don't bring together all the skills in basketball, you're not going to make many three-pointers in a basketball game when people are, counting on you. So we really want to practice the SWIMMER method of prompt engineering on a regular basis as often as possible, at least a few times a week, and then we'll get better at it. And really, it's about clear effective communication with AI. I don't remember which episode I talked about it in the past, but we want to view this whole process as learning to have a productive, meaningful relationship with our AI operating system and humans. So, for example, when you share a custom GPT, you are working with other people. And we want to try to maintain that goal of clear, effective communication. So the S does stand for specific, but we also want to add to it structured. So if you can think about specific structured instructions or specific structured details, you're going to do better. And this is going to lead you towards far better outputs. So let's say, for example, you want to start a custom GPT or create a custom GPT for your puppy training or dog training business. And so instead of writing something like write about the best way to train puppies, you'll want to give it details like you are a professional dog trainer writing an article for new puppy owners on how to best train puppies on the first day of their arrival in their new home. Your tone should be encouraging and informative, and your goal is to explain the most important steps for early socialization on that first day. End quote. So something like that. You want to be specific and structured. It's always a great idea to give the AI a specific role and a target audience. So we have specific and instructions. I hope you think that prompt was written well. We want to try to write well, even though you don't have to. That old adage of garbage in, garbage out, it's less relevant at lower levels of AI use, but it gets more and more important as you go into deeper territories. And it depends on what you want. If you're trying to get some kind of good text or some kind of good communication, then why not write well? And then in that beginning prompt, we gave it, we modeled what output we wanted. We wanted the 3 most important steps. I could have told it to give it to us in bullets or an outline, but the goal is to make sure that it's structured and specific with clear instructions, that we've modeled the output. And then we're going to start experimenting. And one way to experiment, as I mentioned before, is to simply change some words. But we want to take it up a step and start talking about what are called modular prompts or modular prompting. And this is when you break down complex tasks into smaller, more manageable parts. Just like when we were discussing that, or pointing out that a custom GPT is going to do better if you break up the instructions and the details. It's also going to do better if you break up the components of your prompt. If you give it to it in chunks, not only is it going to do better work, but you're going to get to see the process as it happens. And if it starts to take a wrong turn, you can correct. Remember, we are always in charge. The R is review the results, and the results can come in through the process as well. So imagine you want to write a blog post, but it needs to incorporate specific research findings that you've gathered. And you need to use certain keywords. So you want suggestions for like a social media promotion plan. So instead of one giant prompt trying to cram all that in, you could start with the first modular or chunk of information and tell it to summarize the uploaded research findings for a general audience on the topic. We'll go back to the dog one on puppy training or something like that. So then we would get that summary, we would get that information, it would process that research, and it would start the process. And if it started to head in a direction I didn't like, I can click the stop button, or I can just wait till it's done and tell it went in the wrong direction and correct. And then I would write something like, now using that summary and that analysis, draft the main body of a blog post for my puppy training website, consider SEO requirements or at least suggestions or improvements, and incorporate these 5 keywords. And then I might put those words in, something like patience, kindness, whatever words are important there. And then it would draft the first draft of the blog post. Now, for me personally, what I would do then is I would then copy that if I liked the way it headed and it was in good shape for a first draft, and then I always paste it into a Google Doc for a bunch of reasons. I have Google Docs of all my blog posts and all the things that I'm researching and saving, and then I go through and I read it and I revise it and I improve it, and I treat that like a first draft. But when I'm done with that, I might, if I made a bunch of changes, I might then copy those, the final draft, paste it back in, and tell it finally, based on this revised and final blog post, suggest 3 social media posts for Instagram, X, and Facebook, including relevant hashtags. And then that would take that information and prepare it for my social media feeds right away. So this is just an example of how you can use modular prompting in order to improve your work. And it's a bit-by-bit process. So don't feel overwhelmed. Just think of breaking it up into chunks. Another powerful technique that fits perfectly with the SWIMMER acronym, especially focusing on the clear thinking part, is what are called chain of thought prompts. And this involves explicitly asking the AI to think step by step or to show your reasoning. Now, more and more models are automatically showing their reasoning, or you can click a button that will say show reasoning. So you can see what it's doing, how it's thinking, where it's going, and stop it or correct it if it heads in the wrong direction. But we still want to think about doing chain of thought prompts. And so it's really, really useful for complex problems and areas where you want AI you want to see how it gets to the answer. It's not just about the answer. I personally have been learning a lot about the topics that I've done with chain of thought prompts. For example, instead of just asking what's the best strategy for teaching fractions to 3rd graders, or for me, I might have written, what's the best strategy for teaching chess to 3rd graders, I might outline a step-by-step reasoning process to determine the most effective strategy for teaching chess fundamentals to 3rd graders, considering common misconceptions and learning styles. Then, based on that reasoning, propose the strategy. So this process encourages AI to lay out its logic, which can help me evaluate its output and once again see if it's heading in the wrong direction or spot potential errors or biases in its reasoning. It's a way to make the AI's internal process more transparent, and that's a good thing. So these strategies are really, really important and helpful for becoming a better AI user. We want to continually refine and cultivate the skill of prompt priming, prompt engineering. And if you maintain that SWIMMER acronym and method that we talked about in episode 2 and then now again here, you're going to get better really, really fast. So next week, we're going to dedicate episode 9 to the ethical issues, legal issues, the ethical foundations, the big questions that will allow us to move forward with some kind of vocabulary and understanding of the connections. It's really important to understand where AI started and how it's evolved in order to understand what's going on now and moving forward in the future. For example, just today, I read in the news that a federal judge found Anthropic not guilty of intellectual property violations. And I was surprised, to be honest with you. But we'll talk about why and more about that next week. So we won't just talk about the specific lawsuits and companies, but also, the bigger ethical picture and how we can help guide people through this maze in a way that doesn't make us feel like cheaters or that we're, violating other people's intellectual property. Thanks for spending time with me today on AI for Everyone. I hope this episode gave you something useful to think about or something new to try. If you enjoyed it and have not done so already, please subscribe to the podcast so you'll never miss an episode. You're also invited to join the Hanson Education Services newsletter, where I share bonus tools, practical teaching ideas, real AI world examples, and curated updates to help you stay ahead in a world shaped by AI. To learn more or connect with me directly, visit hansoneducationservices.com. That's where you'll find all the podcast links, resources, citations, and more ways to grow your AI confidence. Thanks again for joining us, and remember, the most important 21st century skill is to always keep learning how to learn. See you next time.